He did.
I gotta close it down this weekend, darn it.
I mean, this is 50.
Close the weekend.
Yeah, I'll just use it.
Boy, did we add to it. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Nancy Baring, President of the League of Women Voters of Manistee County. And on behalf of the League and the Manistee News Advocate, we want to welcome you to this forum for of the candidates for City Council 5th District. An important part of the League's work is to provide opportunities like this for citizens to come and hear the candidates, listen to them, and be able to ask them questions so that they can make an informed vote. And also for the candidates to be able to get their word out and with their ideas and their views. And I know some of you were at other candidate forums that we've had lately. This is our last one before the election. But I do, because we are so fortunate, and I want to mention this and emphasize this, fortunate to have in our community a fine daily newspaper that where we can get lots of information. I want to again remind you that last week was National Newspaper Week, and in 1953, then President Dwight D. Eisenhower sent a message to all newspapers in the country, and this is what he said. National Newspaper Week prompts us all to renew our awareness of the remarkable national service rendered daily by the newspapers of America. A free press and a free society are essentially one. And we're so pleased tonight to have as our moderator Michelle Graves, editor of the Manistee News Advocate. And she'll tell you what the rules.
Thank you. Along with the League of Women Voters, the Manistee News Advocate believes in the importance of educating voters. It's not enough to just go out and vote. Residents must know the candidates and the issues they are voting for. That's why events such as this are so important. In addition, the League has their voters' guides in print online at vote411.org, and the Manistee News Advocate is publishing candidate questionnaires for contested races, which are also online at manisteenews.com. We encourage everyone to seek out these materials before Election Day in order to make informed decisions. For each race this evening, this is the only one, we will begin with 2-minute opening statements and we'll begin alphabetically. Then the candidates will have up to 2 minutes each to answer questions which have been prepared by the League. This will be followed by questions from the audience. It is important to remember that civility and respect for each other's views are hallmarks of the League and our forums. If you have questions for the candidates, please write them on the 3x5 cards provided for you. These questions should be brief, to the point, and addressed to both candidates. When you have completed your questions, raise your hand and a member of the League will pick up your questions and bring them to the League table where they will be reviewed for duplication and clarity. The candidates will have up to 90 seconds to respond to each question. Our timers who are sitting down in front will watch the time and will hold up a yellow paddle when the time gets down to 30 seconds and a red paddle when the time is up. Each candidate will also have 2 minutes for a closing statement, and that will be in reverse alphabetical order. Please remember to turn off all cell phones, and we ask that you refrain from applause until the end of each session when we will thank the participants together. The participants this evening, this is the wrong, are the candidates for the 5th District in the city of Manistee. We have Michael Szymanski and James Smith. And we will begin with 2 minutes opening statements, and we'll begin alphabetically with Mr. Smith going first.
I would first like to thank the League of Women Voters and the Manistee News Advocate.
Push it up.
I would first like to thank the League of Women Voters It's on.
Try that again.
Hello?
There you go.
Testing? Okay.
It wasn't on there.
Okay. All the people that have braved the cool and the wind to come out here tonight. I've served on the city council since 2014 and as mayor since 2016. It takes time, energy, and persistence as well as a passion for improving the city and our community, and I have that passion. I've been an instructor, a trainer, an educator, a supervisor, a manager, and a military commander. I've served in the trenches as an electronic technician through senior director levels in the Air Force. I've worked in the schools of Manistee, owned a business, worked for a big box retailer. I was director of housing for 5CAP and a building code inspector for the state of Michigan. I have extensive leadership and management training, as well as a graduate degree. The value of research and planning is vital to the growth and stability of Manistee. I've been responsible for over $1 billion in equipment, a primary aircraft mishap investigation officer, a top secret encrypto control officer, and director of base level maintenance management education programs for the Air Force. Community involvement includes Kiwanis as secretary and president, 3 times as an exalted ruler at the Elks Club, current board of directors, life member of the VFW, and I've attended every level of government meeting in our extended community. Going to seminars and conferences prepares me to address the issues. Lighthouse Park reopening, big day of service, DDA participation, election inspector, precinct captain, commissions, committee chairs, and memberships give me a wide range of experience and interaction with the community. I communicate through a website, email, or text. I respond to all inquiries that I get. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. And again, I'd like to add my thanks to the League of Women Voters and the News Advocate. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank Mr. Smith, not only for his service to our country, but also to our community and his job on City Council. So you're probably wondering why I'm running. Well, I do have a fault, and that's that it's very difficult for me to say no. And in fact, it was so difficult that when I was a commander, a civilian commander, my commander coin says, the answer is yes. The question's how. And that's really what we're working on, is we're trying to find out the hows. How do we make Manistee the first choice for our families, our community, for those who are looking to move here, for those who are looking to find opportunities to build factories. We have lots of opportunities, but we also have lots of challenges. And the only way we're going to address those challenges is collectively and together. You'll know, if you know me at all, you know that I am an optimist, and I firmly believe that Manistee has everything that it needs in order to excel, and not just eke by year after year. We have a tremendous amount of resources. Our waterways, our forests are without reproach. I don't have all of the answers, and I would certainly tell you, first off, although I have a lot of experience, I would count on you to provide the answers. I think Teddy Roosevelt once said that nobody really cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I care about Manistee.
Thank you. You both have touched on this a little bit, but can you describe your specific experience and abilities that prepare you for the office of City Council member, beginning with Mr. Zmansky? Well,
First of all, I was born and raised in Manistee. I am a prodigal son. I returned after 30-some years of service. I also was in the military. But then I took a civilian job, and I did a variety of different jobs over that 30-plus year period, almost all of them involving morale, welfare, recreation, quality of life programs, working with people, trying to make a better community on our military installations around the world. My last job, I was the Force Support Squadron Director at Warner Robins, Georgia. I was responsible for the business programs as well as the community programs. I managed everything from the child care center to the mortuary affairs office. I had a $25 million annual operating budget. I had 870 employees. I had about 89 different diverse activities across that installation. So very similar to what a city manager does is what I did on my past job. But I've also had a variety of other experiences. I was the deputy MWR director for the Army in Korea. I worked at Air Force level food operations. I was handpicked to be the director of the Food Transformation Initiative for the Air Force. I also was part of a program for the Air Force where we combined the services from installation level to the headquarters level. In all of those jobs, in all of my experiences, it's always been people that come first.
In 1994, I became a resident of Manistee. My wife, Jean Nyatt Smith, sitting in the back, was born and raised in Manistee. First time we came up here was 1988, and as soon as we were about 2 days in the visit, we told Jean this is where we will retire. Wonderful community. A lot of things, I think, along the line have prepared me for city council duty. I think some of the highlights that I would share would be an assignment, as Mr. Smansky pointed out, where you don't say no, where I was involuntarily drafted for as a base level maintenance management director for the Air Force Institute of Technology. I was kind of a flight line guy, aircraft maintenance. So that was a long way from the flight line and the people I like to work with in the line atmosphere. There, I learned the value of statistics and data analysis, logistics planning. I was promoted to assistant professor of logistics management in the Air Force School of Systems and Logistics at Wright-Patterson. That was a very interesting assignment. Prepared me for another one that came later on in life when we were at Warner Robins, Georgia. I was the maintenance management officer for an air refueling wing of 28 aircraft. Something came along called the Persian Gulf War. I got deployed with 218 people and ended up in Saudi Arabia in the first Gulf War, 214 days as commander of 101 air refueling tankers and 1,200 people. Quite an experience in dealing with their financial and personal housing and other situations. Gives you a great appreciation for being away from home and dealing with those kind of problems. Thank you.
Our next question, starting with Mr. Smith, is what is your vision for the city of Manistee?
My vision is fairly simply stated. Make Manistee a great place to live, work, and play. Begins with economic development with good-paying, family-sustaining jobs. Redevelopment-ready community certification, selection for the Rising Tide program recognize our potential to be a vibrant community. We must plan for capital improvements and set resources aside. We've been pretty good at building things here in the city of Manistee, new beach houses, a new fish station, a new marina, and a lot of things, but what we don't do is that we don't look forward to the point in time where we're going to need repairs and maintenance on those facilities. We kind of do those year to year and shuffle things around for priority. I've seen communities where they look forward to some needs and they actually put money aside over a 3 or 4 year period of time to take care of those things as opposed to taking from the fund balance or shorting some other program. A well-staffed and equipped public works department is essential to maintaining our 183 acres of parks and beaches in this community. Even more important is the vital water and sewer projects that we have going on in the city have to be maintained by these people. They're the ones that take care of the refuse. They're the ones that take care of the tree trimmings and the branches and all those things out there. One of the things that makes Manistee unique within the county of Manistee is our police, fire, and EMS. These are perceived to be very valuable services to the community. And we've got to figure out going into the future, when we have less revenue and we have rising costs, how we're going to maintain these services and share things with other communities so that we can all survive with those.
Well, I agree that economic development is an incredible opportunity for Manistee. We have been remiss in the past. Rising tides, in my estimation, was not a prize. It was basically, we were picked out because we weren't living up to our potential as a community. When you look at the communities around us and you see that they're thriving, and one of the things that made some of our competition thrive is because they had affordable workforce housing. You have to have workforce housing in order to bring in businesses. And I looked at some statistics, 39% of Manistee residents are renting. And of that 39%, 43% are considered to be overburdened with their rents. That makes it hard to run and do other things with your family if you're worried about paying your rent bills, you're paying your light and your utilities. And everyone knows our taxes are high here. We have to do something. We've got to take some risk. We're not going to get anywhere if we just sit back. You know, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And we have to try a little bit harder. And it's going to make a change. And change is not always easy for people. But if we're not willing to take a risk, if we're not willing to lower our taxes and see if that won't grow our cities, then we'll never know. There's a reason why people aren't building in Manistee, but they're building all around us, is because of taxes. We have to address taxes, and we have to address the social fabric in our community in order to make us the place that is first choice.
I think you kind of lead into our next question a little bit there, Mr. Zmansky, with what issues do you see as the most important or pressing for the city?
Well, there are a few that are very obvious. You know, we have infrastructure issues. We have schools that need attention. We don't have enough early childhood development in our communities. These are all things that businesses are looking for. They not only want to have, you know, a good place for their employees to live, but they also want those other facts. They want to make sure that there is educational opportunities, and we need to do more. You know, our high school is a fairly new building, but if you look at our middle school, and our elementary schools, they're not very good shape. And we have an old high school that is basically an eyesore. And we have eyesores all over our community that need to be addressed. You know, it's a shame when you go down your main river street and you see boarded up buildings. It's not acceptable. We have, and understand, you know, there is right ways and wrong ways to renovate a building, but putting plywood on the front of them just doesn't work. We have the same thing in other parts of our community, where, you know, people, and many of those are renters, don't really care about the property. They don't care about their neighborhoods. But we should, and they should too. And part of what we need to do in order to encourage our town is to focus on what we can do. Not what the city can do, but what we can as citizens of Manistee.
Issues that are most important or pressing for the city of Manistee. Certainly a lack of tax revenue growth and unfunded liabilities for pensions are two of the issues that I would put in the forefront. When it comes to housing, that's always an issue of interest. Right now we have Manistee Place, Reese Park, recently Cherry Hills, in the Housing Commission in the city that are under payments in lieu of taxes as opposed to paying regular property taxes. They get a substantial break. We had a proposal in town from Third Coast for the low-income senior housing development that asked for a 10% payment in lieu of taxes for 35 years. That would have taken $1.9 million of tax revenue away from the city. We passed that 10% 35-year payment in lieu of taxes. They didn't get the tax credits to build it from the state because they didn't rank high enough in competition for those. We took a step last night in City Council by moving future non-union division hires, rehires, and transfers to a defined contribution retirement plan in place of the Michigan Employee Retirement System defined benefit plan. In 2008, this plan was 100% funded. Today, we have a $3.2 million liability for this plan. In 2006, when we went into it, it cost us $22,500. This year, it's cost us $447,000, and it's projected to go over $600,000 by 2021. This is an essential move for our financial stability. This is something that we have to look at going forward. Capital Improvement Plan, 83% obligated when we took office.
Our final question from the league is, does District 5 have any special needs that you will work for, and how will you go about that? And we'll get Mr. Smith.
It was an interesting question when I read that. First of all, you have to live in the district to run for city council. You need 2 years of residency. You need to be 25 years old. However, you are elected and represent the city at large. So whoever holds this seat is representing the city, not just District 5. The things that I see in District 5 specifically are that we have a number of homes that are in the freeze notice category for winter weather, where their pipes are not deep enough in the ground. They have to run water so they don't freeze in the wintertime. We recently got a grant for nearly $1 million to start rerunning some of the lines to the homes to a deeper depth, and those homes are a priority on that. It's not enough of a grant to do the entire city. We'll have to move forward using the depreciation funds in the future, but that's a good start. The things I hear from people are narrow streets and winter parking, alternate parking, concerns that streets are too narrow with the parking in wintertime where people don't get up to the curb, and for emergency vehicles. There's a number of things, but when you look at projects at large, you look at the city in general and prioritize based on those requirements. You certainly advocate for those things that are within your district, but the main responsibility is to the city at large.
Well, I agree. No, the 5th District is a microcosm of Manistee. We have a little bit of everything. We have businesses, we have nice quality homes, and we have homes that need a little bit of work. And one of the things that I would encourage is working with our local lending institutions to develop a way for people to be able to restore or buy older homes in Manistee and bring them up to code. And other places, other cities have used those, and they're called restoration mortgages. And they run and look almost like a new construction mortgage. But it gives the opportunity to borrow at mortgage rates instead of what it would cost to buy a home or renovate it with going in and trying to get a loan at 11 or 12% for doing it yourself. So there's some opportunities there. Interesting, one of the same thing, I live on that street, by the way, that has the water that you have to run all winter long, and it is a pain in the neck. We have little hoses in the basement going down the drain to keep it going. But there are other issues, and one of them, interestingly enough, came up when somebody asked me why is our water bill so expensive in our town? And part of that is addressed because we're trying to make our water safe, and we're trying to make sure that we're protecting our environment. Those are good things. But interesting, here's some opportunities for us as a community. The most expensive part of our community water is our toilet. 2,000 flushes a year. If your toilet is older than 2014, it uses between 3 and 6 gallons of flush. If you bought a new toilet, it would use 1.6 to 1 gallons of flush. So do the math. You can save a lot of money, about at least $110 a year on your water bill by doing something that's also good for the environment.
We'll now move on to the audience questions. And the first one is, what kind of businesses do you believe are a good fit for Manistee, and how would you attract such businesses? Starting with Mr. Smansky.
That's a good question. I would start off by saying the technology businesses. You know, if you think about it, we as a people are changing. We are evolving because of technology. You know, people are clinging to their cell phones, right? We have pacemakers. We're going to become part machine in the not too distant future. So I would say let's encourage those type of industries to come here, because it is the future. It's not going to decrease, it's going to increase. We are going to become quasi-robots in 50 years. So let's get on the bandwagon. The other area that I think that we have an opportunity are, you know, the jobs that require you to work from home. All you need is something that we need to expand on, and that is better internet service. My daughter-in-law works for a health insurance company, and again, she works and has moved 3 times with my son, who's in the military, and she's ended up with 2 promotions, even with all those moves, instead of having to stop and start over. So those are 2 areas I think that we have some great opportunities.
Attracting businesses to the city of Manistee is certainly a challenge. I would have to agree that that infrastructure things like high-speed internet is truly important. That's been talked about for years. 5 years ago, the city entered into a contract with the Alliance for Economic Success, and high-speed broadband was one of the elements on the contract for that was never achieved. People still talk about it. If you don't have that high-speed, reliable network, you can't work from home. You can't work in your office and make connection and reach out and accomplish much. We really need some focus on that. Right now, the attention seems to be to rural areas, to include everybody in the internet and with high-speed broadband and such, as opposed to focus to the urban areas. Other things that we've done. The planning and zoning has gone through the process, and several years ago we did a revamp on our master plan. We are a redevelopment-ready certified community, and there were a number of steps we took to achieve that level. I would disagree that Rising Tide is a negative. Rising Tide is a positive. It's a program initiated by the governor of the state of Michigan to enhance the economic opportunity of communities that have all the assets available to move forward.
Our next question is, how do you see the new fee-for-services policy impacting the local economy and nonprofit organizations? Starting with Mr. Smith.
Fees for service. I said we have some fees for service right now. Refuse is paid for in 2 ways. One, it's paid through for 1.15 mils through your tax bill, and then you pay a monthly service charge for that. In addition to that, if you want curbside recycling, you can get curbside recycling 2 times a month. Fees for service. We do our water and sewer based on that. And Mr. Samansky touched on that. The Burton and Associate rate study that was done back in 2014 went to a ready-to-serve rate change. And one of the things that it included was sprinkler systems, and one of the first things the council did was to repeal the sprinkler system because it didn't have anything to do with water capacity and a ready-to-serve charge. It was a double charge to people that had gone to the point of having a second meter put in for irrigation on their property. That fee structure ensures going forward through some small changes that we have what we call depreciation funds available. As our system ages and needs maintenance, we have the funds available to move forward and take care of those issues without raising the rates further or going through a special assessment process. I like to limit the fees that we charge people. You pay property taxes at a combined almost 19.7 mils, and that is the highest in the county.
I think Mr. Smith may have missed part of that question. I think part of what I understand is that there is now a fee for service for special events in Manistee. And I personally am opposed to it. I think it would be detrimental. Again, instead of building on our volunteers and the people who work so hard to bring special events to our community, we're now looking at nickel and diming some of those events right out of existence. And again, it is also, as I look at what was submitted to the Forest Festival, it may not generate enough money to get us out of our tax problems, but it certainly could generate enough cost to make some of our special organizations, and oh, by the way, most of our special events are done by private organizations in this community. And those private organizations give back more than they give, right? So anything that would impact the quality of life in our community by reducing the opportunities for people to get out and socialize, I think is a mistake.
The next question is, with damage to the city marina docks earlier this year, what will you do to ensure that all of our boat docks are open all summer? Starting with Mr. Szymanski.
Well, I happen to have been there when the siege went through. I was working at the senior center on a project, and I saw it happen. And it was devastating. I mean, it's something that I had never seen. The river literally ran backwards. It was something like out of the ends of time. And it did do a tremendous amount of damage. The problem is when something like that happens, it's unexpected and unplanned for. And the kinds of workforce needed to rebuild our docks is not always readily available. It's kind of like getting a plumber, right? It's never easy to get a plumber when you need one. And it's the same kind of issue here. I know that the city has got insurance money, and I know that they're also looking for grants. By the way, I think our city manager and our city Public Works have done a great job trying to do the best they can with the resources they have, not just on the docks, but in other areas as well. So I think that you will see the docks repaired. I think they're going to be better than ever. Anything that we can do to support our our sports fishermen, as well as our leisure boaters, is a good thing for Manistee.
Yesterday at the Harbor Commission meeting, Chief Kozel, our Public Safety Director, gave us a plan for the repair of the docks following the siege event. I just happened to be at the Elks baking desserts for Friday night fish fry when this took place, and rapidly moved my truck from where it was parked down by the river back up onto the street at the advice of Public Works. The fortunate thing to this is the forward-thinking staff in City Hall, when we insure this for loss of business on our marina and our docks. So all of our business loss that we had throughout the season this year will be covered in an insurance payment. Spicer Group went out and did some very extensive engineering to see what damage we had down below the water, down where the dock poles were set and all that. Came up with some good estimates. And we have a timeline right now which is fairly tight, and there will be some contracting and such, but the docks are fundamentally expected to be repaired no later than May, but with a target date in early April. So that is in progress. Nobody's taken a back seat to it. It's just an extensive amount of damage that was done, and not only the ones that were visible, but also assessing the potential damage and what needed to be done to the ones that were still upright.
The next question has to do with deer. What is your plan to take care of the excessive deer population on the southwest area of our city, and how soon would it be implemented, starting with Mr. Smith?
The deer issue is something that continues to come up. The deer population is on the increase. There's no doubt about that. What took place in 2014 is that there was first a vote to have the police department act as deer call participants. Following that, there was a subsequent vote where we stopped that. The reason we stopped that is that we had some contacts, Roger Zelinsky at the USDA that came up and did an assessment, people that are experts in deer calling and population control. They took a look at the police plan and said it was unsafe to shoot in some of the areas that the police had identified, and citizens wouldn't allow us to shoot on areas that were clear and safe to shoot. As soon as they said that, the insurance carrier for the city said that they would not insure the city if we went ahead with the police deer shoot. I have great respect for our police. They're the best educated, best trained, professional force I've ever had the experience of dealing with. But they are not on a par with the USDA or the DNR expert deer call people. That request is back to Chief Kozel, and it's in work. We're trying to get some property under cooperation now.
Well, it goes like this. You know, if you do nothing, it doesn't get better. It only gets worse. And for 4 years, they've done nothing, and it's gotten worse. If you go to the playground of our elementary school, it looks like Wild Kingdom. There's more deer there than there are at deer parks in Germany. And, you know, they're defecating in the playground where we have kids coming in the next day. They're, you know, again, in the Boy Scouts, I taught Scout leaders, and one of the things we would teach right off the bat is know and use your resources. That's how you become an effective Scout leader. There's a guy in Manistee, his name is Jack Adamchuk, some of you may know him. He's been raising deer his whole adult life. He is what I would consider a subject matter expert, even more so than some of the people that work in the DNR, because he knows the deer personally, up close. He basically uses an air rifle, he tranquilizes them, he harvests their horns, and recently there is a recovery drug that he gives to the deer afterwards, and they bounce right back. He doesn't lose any animals. And I talked to Mr. Adamchuk, and he said he'd be willing to help support culling and relocating our deer population, because anybody who hunts knows we could use a few more deer out in the national forest.
The next question is, what are your top 3 suggestions for reducing city expenses, starting with Mr. Smansky?
You know, it's very difficult when you're looking at reducing expenses. I would look at how we can increase revenues first. You know, again, we have, you know, certain things that you want to protect in your community. Health and safety is one of them. You know, it may cost to have a police force and a fire department. It costs to train them. But in the long run, how much does a life cost? How many here know of somebody who's been saved by one of our police or firemen in the last 6 months? So you got to be careful that we don't cut and reduce the ability for our city to grow. I know that there is areas that, again, not having all the answers, I would suggest that we work closely with the people who know best how to cut on any given program, and not salami slice, but look at things that are not really that beneficial to a very large group, and look at those types of reductions. But I don't think reductions is really the answer. I think it's growing our economy that is the right way to approach it.
That's really a fairly tough question. What are the 3 items that you can cut? There's always things that you can cut, but then the sidetrack to that is that what are you not providing in the process of doing that? Over the last 4 years, one of the things significant that we just did was we eliminated soft billing for transport and EMS services. Back in 2014, a decision was made, not aware to council, to soft bill residents for the difference between the cost that they had billed and the cost of their insurance to gain extra revenue for the city. The transport never came online with that thought in mind, only to bill residents for the coverage they have from insurance, so we stopped that. Since I've been there, holiday gift certificates. I pay attention to the details of our expenses, of our revenue reports and everything. And so, what's this holiday gift certificate? Well, we give that to non-union employees for a Christmas bonus. And then I went to a Christmas party, and they said, you don't have to pay for that. And I insisted the following Monday that I come in and pay for it. I go to the city attorney, and he says, these are not legal expenses with taxpayers' money. That's small things, but paying attention to the detail, and again, raising revenue is the key. Not cutting expenses, and certainly not cutting services, and not cutting personnel.
The next question, starting with Mr. Smith, is what do you think of the DDA? Keep it as is or change it?
DDA? As mayor, I get to sit a seat on the DDA board, and I've been able to watch the process for the last 2 years. I think there's some changes that are necessary in the DDA and the way it functions. But a DDA is an important element to the downtown area of the city. They provide a focal point for volunteers, and those volunteers get a lot of things done as far as events and other planning and service activities. It would be difficult. One of the things that would potentially lose without the DEA would be the DDA redevelopment liquor licenses that are important in attracting a restaurant that comes to town, because if you don't have a liquor license available through the regular system, which we typically don't, the only way to get one is through the DDA. They have to have a $70,000 investment. They have to meet all the other criteria, and that license is limited to that address only. It's not transferable unless someone else buys the business and operates from the same location. There are important functions done by the DDA, but I'd certainly say changes need to be made in the future.
I volunteer with some of the events with the DDA, and again, I think also, as a private organization, maybe not everyone knows that they're a private organization as well. And again, their focus is trying to build a better downtown. And I think they've helped. But again, the DDA alone is not going to make Manistee first choice. It's going to take us. What people did for the Vogue Theater is a perfect example on how you can make downtown wow, right? And it was all done from you guys. You guys did it, and you guys are doing it. We have the same opportunity with the Ramsdell Theater to have it become a focal point. There are so many activities that the DDA, if empowered and given the resources, can help with. I would like to see River Street look as good from Memorial Drive as it does from River Street down. and have the Riverwalk be an exciting and vibrant place for tourists as well as us as part of the community.
The next question is, what do you intend to do about blight?
Blight is enforceable if we are behind it. We are going to make the difference with blight. We should not accept the fact that a neighbor doesn't take care of the property. If it is an absentee landlord, there are already provisions. It's just that it takes us. It takes us to get involved and just say, you know, wait a minute, I'm your neighbor, and this is not an acceptable way for you to treat your neighbors. We can make the difference as much as having people knock on your door, and that's part of it. If people are not obeying the ordinance, then they should be brought to task, and they should be given the opportunity to make it right, or in some cases, the city needs to take over. It's not appropriate to have a building boarded up on River Street for 10 years or longer and not have anything done. It's just a shame. And the same thing, if you live in an area and you want your property values to go up, you need to make sure that there are ways for that place to get brought back up. And that's where I go back to the restoration mortgages. I think that's a way that we can take a foothold in getting rid of some of our blight.
Blight turns out to be a hot button issue depending on who you talk to. Downtown, adjacent merchants take exception to these boarded up buildings. I recently went to a historic district commission meeting. What caught my attention, you go to a lot of meetings all the time, but this one in particular indicated that people were applying to have some permits renewed. You know, as long as they have a valid permit from the historic district commission, or if they have a permit from a state building inspector, you really can't do much about a blight condition while that permit period is open. These two permits, one of them was first issued in 2008, one of them was issued in 2010. So now we're talking about permits that have been open for 10 years and 8 years. And my question is, where are the people that are asking for the renewal? They weren't there. Don't give them another year extension on this without them coming forth and saying what they've done to remedy the situation. Ordinance enforcement. Blight ordinance exists for the city. Okay? City manager is responsible for ordinance enforcement. We have a police officer that is in charge of blight. And it's not the only thing he does, but he does go around. I've been out with the blight officer in the past and seen the kind of job they do. There's just not enough time for everything.
The next question is, what is your position on low-income housing in downtown Manistee?
You know, it's a good thing. I got some numbers here for housing in Manistee. Recent numbers from citydata.com. There are 545 units of low-income housing in the county of Manistee. 500 of them are in the city of Manistee, over 90%. There are 1,017 apartments for rent in the city of Manistee. 52% of those, or 565 units, are available for less than $499. Average rent in the city of Manistee is $445. The median gross rent, you know, half above, half below, gross rent, utilities and all that, is $531. There are 38% renters in the city versus 19% in the county. Our poverty rates a point higher, we're 14.8% in the city, 13.4% in the county. I have no opposition to housing of any type in the city. What I oppose is payments in lieu of taxes or tax abatements that don't contribute to the resources they're going to consume in the city. Those are things that we need to have to grow. We can't continue to add population and requests for services without paying for those additional services.
You know, there's lots of different types of low-income housing, and sometimes it's misunderstood. You know, low income doesn't mean that they're unemployed. In most cases, they are. These are not, you know, as some would describe some of the issues, these are people that wouldn't contribute to the community. I don't believe that in a minute. I think that just because you may not have a lot of income doesn't mean that you're not a contributing factor to a community. You know, the senior center was considered to be low-income housing, that project, and what it would have, I believe, what it would have done would have brought an opportunity for Manistee to develop that north side corner. And it's a missed opportunity because that contract, the developer is come and gone. He's brought his money elsewhere. Manistee would have not only had housing units for seniors with low income, but it would also have spurred other things. It would have improved our walkability score because they were planning on putting in a pharmacy. It would have created a better view from the coming into the corridor of Manistee. And again, we have a need for senior housing in our town. We have a need for veteran housing in our town. We have a need for workforce housing in our town.
Our final question from the audience is, what role do you think that the Historic District Commission plays in the future of Manistee?
I think our historic district and what they do for Manistee is essential. It is one of the assets we have. We are a very interesting historical community. And I like the idea that they're actually looking at blending our history to our culture. You know, in the Lions Club, you know, the lion emblem has two sides. And the reason is the Lions motto is we look to the past and we're looking towards the future. And I think that's what we get from our historic district and how they encourage. And it gives us opportunities for other MISTA dollars to be able to help us grow. So I encourage it, and I think that there's much more that we can do.
The Historic District Commission is a commission that reports to the City Council. There has been some issues with the commission in the process. In the past, Council called for a joint work session with the Historic District Commission members. We had that meeting. There's been some turnover on it. There was a consultant hired, a study initiated on the district. Recommendations were made by the commission that were opposed by the consultant because they ran contrary to federal guidelines and state law and may have jeopardized certification that allows people to seek matching funds for some of the restoration of historic property. But it's one of the things that makes the historic district makes the city unique. People marvel at those things. It needs to be preserved, but it also needs to provide a bridge and an avenue for people to get things done as opposed to present barriers. People have to guide applicants through the process because historic reservation is very expensive, very time consuming. You have to find people that are specially qualified to do a lot of those things. It is an important element to the city and it needs to provide guidance to the applicants so the job can get done, not be hindered.
We'll now move on to the closing statements, and we'll begin with Mr. Szymanski.
You know, I love to quote Teddy Roosevelt. He's one of my heroes, and he says, "Far and away the best prize that life offers is the chance to work hard at work worth doing." And I try to live by that. I try to work hard. I've worked hard my whole life. And regardless of this election, I will continue to work hard for Manistee. There's a lot of work to be done. There's more we can do to support our arts and our cultural activities. We want to build the community fabric. We want to support things like the youth project. We want to support our schools. We want to develop some early childhood programs that we so much need. Our military has the best child development literally in the country, and there is a great model for it. And it provides so much for young families to know that their infants are being taught in, not just cared for, but actually taught in that process. And I also think that we have an obligation to empower our community and empower our volunteers, but also we need to empower, we need to train and encourage and recognize the people who work for our city, who work and know more about the details than we do. So in closing, I would just say that I don't have all the answers, but I think you do. And one of the things that I would try to enact would be town hall meetings. I think they're a great, messy way to get things done and get the word out.
You know, I look back over the last 4 years and I reflect on a sense of accomplishment. You know, I'd hold up a News Advocate article from 2015. Fowler Township DDA declared that negotiations with the city of Manistee for a sewer agreement are terminated, and they are now contracting with the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians for sewer system. Roger Zielinski and I got word of that. I started attending township DDA meetings, started reaching out to township officials, and basically pleaded with them to come back to the table and listen to us and work in agreement. We have the capacity in our sewage treatment plant to handle their product, and that's increased revenue to the city. But I'll be honest with you, my biggest fear was the Little River Band would run that line down by the prison underneath the lake and up and take care of Fowler Township and steal 25% of the city's revenue for water and sewer from the Oaks prison system by undercutting our rates. That would have been disastrous to the taxpayers in the city of Manistee. We got 12th Street fixed down there at Maple Street by the school. We got Jocelyn Cove started again and has sold the units that they built. We're going to restart on Edgewater. We got North Channel built. You know, we've had a lot of progress, a lot of movement and activity in the last 4 years, but I'm going to tell you, things are slow. I talked about the defined contribution plan for the non-union people. You know, we've been working on that for 2.5 years. It takes a period of time to get a consensus, to get a majority, and move forward to save some of those funds. You don't always save today, but you look forward to what you're going to save tomorrow and what the future is going to be like. I'm a planner for the future. I'm a proactive individual, and I like to take care of things before they happen. Thank you.
If you just sit down for a minute, I just have a couple of announcements. Before you leave, I'd like to direct you to 2 additional sources of nonpartisan information. In the back, you will find, and I hope you're familiar with this from other elections, a voter's guide that's put out by the League of Women Voters of Michigan. And it has a wealth of voting information as well as interviews or questions asked from the state candidates for public office, from the governor down to the boards of education and the regents for Wayne State. So you'll find a lot of information here. Also on the back, you can take this into the voting booth with you if you make your decisions and write them down. So please, they're free, and please help yourself on the way out. For those of you who prefer digital knowledge, we have bookmarks that have our League of Women Voters digital voters guide called vote411.org, and this will have the same information as in this printed voter's guide, but in addition, it has your local races. So you go to this site and you plug in your address and follow the directions, and when it says show my races, you will get a list of all the races that will be on your individual ballot. And they include, we've sent out questionnaires with the same 3 questions to all the candidates, and you can see and compare the way they answer and their views and ideas on things. So that's really helpful. And we have actually a big thank you to the person who has made this possible in our league, and that is Jan Sapek at the far end. And we really appreciate it. It's a lot of work, but she is a smart gal. So the League of Women Voters and the News Advocate would like to thank the Manistee Inn and Marina for providing the venue, the candidates who gave their time tonight, and of course you, the audience, for taking time out of your busy schedules to become better informed. All league meetings, I just want to add, are free and open to the public, and you are all invited to attend any and all of them. And we hope that you will consider joining the league and becoming a part of the process to shape our community and to keep our democracy viable. Membership is open to all men and women over the age of 16. So please join us, and thank you so much for coming tonight. Very interesting.
Very good phrase. Let's hear it.
I went out till Wednesday night. I'm looking at the moon. Or half a moon. I'm leaning up against the car and hand holding. Quite surprised how good I can hold it.